To talk more about this, let's bring back in Jeff Small, but we also want to welcome back Steve Forbes. He's one of our favorite guests here on The Income Generation. He's also editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine. Steve, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, we have so much to talk about. I want to get your feedback on, and do you think we're going about preventing the spread of this virus properly? What do you think it's going to mean for the economy, for the stock market? And then my co-host, Jeff Small, I know he's chomping at the bit, just waiting to ask you questions about how you think this is going to affect the president in November. So let's start with how we're coping with this. I know you're not a doctor per se, but you're a smart guy. Do you think we're handling it properly? Do you think we're threatening to maybe go back to work too soon?
Well, I think the way they're approaching it is the right one, and that is to allow each state, even a city, to determine how they're going to come out of this thing, get to the other side, as they say. New York City, very, very densely populated. New Jersey, where I live, the most densely populated state in the union. Very different from, say, South Dakota or Oklahoma, where they have a much more open policy, or parts of Florida and Texas. We'll see what happens in Georgia. So you have to let each one do it. And I think there's more testing that needs to be done so we get sounder conditions and data to be able to make these decisions. But the American people want to get back to work. We want to get this economy starting to move again. Mm-hmm. So I think it can be done in a prudent fashion, but it's going to be not one size fits all. You're going to see different things done in different parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. So speaking about the economy, the issue then becomes, okay, if this were it, if we had a vaccine or a cure today, we'd have a V-shaped recovery, things would pop right back. But now we go back to work gradually. There's still some industries that aren't going to really come back in full for a long, long time. And there's always the threat that we go back too soon. We have another wave of infections. We're back out again. And the economy just drags on that much longer. So what are your thoughts overall economically and with the stock market in terms of how you see this playing out, just looking at it where you are today?
Well, there are going to be parts of the economy that obviously are going to bounce back far faster than other parts. We all know what's happened to the travel industry, the energy industry, and certain other industries. And that's going to be a while. They're going to have to, airlines are going to have to do some very creative things, perhaps in the architecture of the plane. But I think the economy as a whole will start to come back. And the key thing is, this gets to the campaign in November. What kind of an economy are we going to have next year? What kind of environment are we going to have next year? Mm. If we have a positive environment of tax cuts, deregulation, and having a sound dollar, that would create, I think, conditions for a very booming economy next year. And I think the economy will heal far faster than some skeptics think. But if we go with the way of the Democrats, which is raising taxes, putting on more regulations, one size fits all, we're going to have a very disappointing recovery. And unemployment's not going to bounce back the way it should.
Okay, now that's the perfect cue for my partner, Jeff, to take over and ask you some political questions. But before we do, gut instinct. What's your gut instinct? Have we seen the lows in the stock market for this year? Do you think we'll test those lows, or do you think we'll go lower?
Oh, I think you could see points where you get scares about this thing coming back again, and the market could take a hit. But I think the market tries to anticipate the future. And if it looks like the Republicans are going to do well in November, I think the market will reflect that. But if it fears that the Democrats might get in, you will see a downward trend. The market wants to know what lies ahead. And I think it's done quite well from the lows, precisely because they think there's hope that we will get out of this thing. Various parts of the country starting to come back again. Sure. One of the things I hope that President Trump does is push for a payroll tax suspension, 15%. You know, you make $40,000, $50,000 a year, that's a $3,000 or $4,000 raise. For employers, that's $500 billion of less labor costs. So it's win-win, easy to administer. And I think that would be a good way to get the economy in a very good launch pad for later this year and also going into 2021. And I think he could shame the Democrats in the House to go along with it. Nancy Pelosi, Nancy Antoinette, eating her ice cream, is she going to resist giving people a $3,000 or $4,000 raise? I don't think so at the end of the day.
So great. So since we're on politics, and I know that Jeff Small is sitting in the Melbourne studio just like a caged animal now and wants to talk about politics. Go ahead, Jeff. I'm handing it over to you.
Hey, Steve, it's Jeff Small here. Hey, listen, I look at President Trump as being almost Teflon because they've put him through so much, and he always seems to find a way to turn lemon into lemonades to his advantage because he's got such a high intellect and he's so smart. What do you foresee happening with the election in the fall? Because we just lost 26 million jobs. Going to lose a lot more than that when this is all said and done. The virus is an unknown thing. It's a black swan event. You know, historically, that's usually bad news for an incumbent. So tell me what your viewpoints are. Is the president at jeopardy for not winning the re-election because of these economic issues and because of the coronavirus issues?
The answer is no. Everyone knew that the economy was doing well before this health disaster came along. And most people now accept that China was responsible for it. They could have contained this thing early on. So that's not the president's fault. The question is, how is he dealing with it? And despite some missteps, because remember, there was no playbook here. This is unprecedented. I think people see that he is in command. And the fact that he brings experts on the stage when he does his daily briefings is very reassuring. And he also goes out of his way to thank people who have been doing great things, whether it's truckers, online people in healthcare. He always shares, he doesn't try to say it's all me. He always points his finger and praises those who are out there doing the real work to get this economy through this, and the country through this crisis. I think people like that in a leader, one who can bring teams together to get big things done and knows how to share the praise, shower out the praise, you might say, to those who are doing extraordinary things. I think that's a side of Trump they didn't see before.
It's definitely a side they didn't see before. I guess I just get concerned a little bit because I see it's almost like a lose-lose situation where the Democrats could turn around and say, well, we go back too early and there's a second wave of infections. Well, then, hey, he cared more about the almighty dollar than he did about human lives. Conversely, if he stretches it out longer, then the economy will really be disrupted by November. So all I can say is, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. We need to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back in a minute with more words of wisdom from our good friend, Steve Forbes. We'll be right back here on The Income Generation. Now it's time to welcome back my co-host, Jeff Small, along with Steve Forbes, editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine. Steve, thanks so much for sticking around.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
And, you know, I really apologize. We had to take one of those pesky commercial breaks. You guys were on a roll with such a great political conversation. So, Jeff, Steve, take it away.
Well, Steve, you know, I've been watching these coronavirus updates by the White House every day, and they've been rather impressive. But one of the things that's impressed me the most, and just to shift gears here and downplay some of the serious stuff, is how intelligent President Trump is. He is just one tough negotiator, and I think that's an X factor that everybody underestimates him on, that he is incredible. His intellect is very high. You know, would you agree with that?
Well, I think what a couple of things are happening here. One is he's holding a virtual press conference every day. And while they have some real jousting there, what it does is this prepares him for the main event in November. When those debates come, when he is dealing with the press and during the campaign, he's going to be ready for prime time, whereas Joe Biden is just going to be starting to dance around the ring and not going to be ready for the big bout. So he's going to be ready for it. The public has seen a lot of him. And I think what the public has been impressed with is the way he brings other people in. He thanks people. He's always thanking the frontline workers. He thanked the truckers the other day. It's not just the Donald Trump show. He brings other people in. He has them by his side during these pressers. And I think that shows that he has put together a very capable team. And that shows that he recognizes that this is not just about him. This is about the country as a whole, the people who make this country work. And I think that's beginning to get through to people. This guy understands far better than the Democrats eating their ice cream what makes this country tick.
I think before it was funny because, you know, I think a lot of the Democrats accused him of lacking humility, but you're absolutely right. What we've seen now is actually much more humility as he's saying, look, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not an expert in infectious disease or an expert there. Let me bring these people in. My only worry is that it's like a lose-lose situation. It's almost like, okay, the economy gets going, but we get another wave of infections and deaths, and then that's a pawn that the Democrats can use against him. But on the other hand, if he waits too long and gets everyone back, and then the economy is doing really poorly around November, they'll use that against him. So my concern is it could be a lose-lose, and I certainly hope not, because we all want to see him get back in.
I think he's going to dominate the campaign platform, so to speak, setting the agenda. All the Democrats have been able to say nothing you do is right, and now they're even talking about another investigation, which I think the public is fairly sick of right now. They want action, things done, not another fruitless investigation, whether like Russian collusion and the impeachment fiasco and other things. People want real things done. And this guy's dealing with an unprecedented crisis. There were no playbooks on this. We've never had anything like this before. And so I think the public will cut him a lot of slack. And in terms of opening up the economy, people want to get back to intermingling with people. A poll was taken recently and found that 50% of the people want to be able to mix with other people, even more than going back to their jobs. They want to be able to mix again. And I think that's going to be something you're going to see in more and more states around the country, again, at different timetables.
Sure.
But people are not going to blame him for the fact this disease is still out there. You'd almost think that he invented the disease in Trump Tower and loosed it on the American people the way they talk. I think most voters are going to see through that.
So now you have, I know you're hoping that in his second term, we'd be able to get tax cuts 102. Now with all the debt we're taking on, do you think that might preclude him, should he get reelected, from actually having another round of tax cuts per se and getting it through Congress?
This gets to the question, how do you create the environment for a revived economy? Maximum economic growth, job creation, incomes rising.
Sure.
And I think that putting on taxes is going to give us what we had after 2008, which was the worst recovery from a sharp downturn just about in American history. So the debt itself is not going to preclude tax cuts. After World War II, we had debt higher today proportionately than concerning the economy.
True.
What did we do? We virtually cut household income taxes in half, deregulated, put in a great college program, the GI Bill of Rights, put in labor reforms, got rid of all wartime controls, which the experts said we shouldn't have done. We did it anyway. And by golly, over 10 million veterans quickly demobilized, went into the workforce, and our unemployment rate remained low. And that's what you get with a revived economy. And that's what we're going to have here. You want a stagnant economy and high unemployment, or do you want a vigorous economy that can get people back on their feet again?
Steve, in 45 seconds, we've heard the president hint toward the fact that this could be a virus that China created. Do you think that when this whole thing shakes out, that we could end up becoming a little bit more isolationist, or at bare minimum, it hurts all the trade developments we've made so far with China?
I think you're going to see readjustments just because smart business people want to have supply chains that they don't think are going to be subject to interruptions. And China's shown that it's not been a reliable partner in that respect. As for the source of the disease, I think it's becoming clearer and clearer. It came out of that laboratory in Wuhan. They were doing experiments, doing research on bats. And because of carelessness, lack of safety, it ended up getting into the general population. And I think people are going to be holding China accountable for that. You already see states like Missouri and Mississippi and others are going to sue China. I don't know where those suits are going to go, but it underscores the fact this did not need to happen.
Wow. Well, I got to say, I really appreciate you being here with us today, as usual. Time flies when you're having fun. But in closing, I want to say this. I'm glad to see you coming around now and being in the Trump camp. I know you were in mourning for a while right after Bernie Sanders dropped out of the race. But I'm glad to see a smile back on your face, and you're supporting the president as you should be. So again, Steve, thanks so much for being here with us.
Bernie Sanders will become a TV commentator where it's just words and not policies.
And that would be a great place for them, wouldn't it? I love it. Steve, thanks so much once again. You stay with us too. We have more coming up here in just a moment, right here on the Income Generation. We'll be right back.